They're not running us back, Kratzy. They're not going to do that. I know John Middleton and I know Dave Dombrowski, and they want that damn trophy back.
All right. Well, this segment is also running on national television on Valley Sports TV, so we'll do our best. But I mean, good luck to Ruben Amaro Jr. to keep it clean here as the one of the hosts of the Phillies show joins us right now. The former GM, former player, the whole deal, and big star on the Phillies show. Make sure you check out that show. More on that coming up in just a sec. But what the heck happened? Not just in this game 4, Ruben, but in this postseason for Philadelphia. Like, what's the one thing that you'll truly remember from this 2024 postseason from the Phillies letdown?
Well, I think it was sort of a culmination of what was been happening for the second half of the season. I mean, that the guys just did not swing the bats the way you would expect them to. You know, I know there's a lot of streaky hitters and a lot of really accomplished hitters in this lineup, but you thought, and I thought that it was probably the deepest team in all of baseball as far as just overall talent. But when it comes right down to it, I mean, the second half of the season and in through the postseason, they just were very vulnerable. They were exploitable. And, the Mets in this series, they just absolutely exploited them. They outplayed them. And, you got to give the Mets some credit. And you also have to give some fault to the Phillies because they just couldn't make the adjustments that were necessary. Clearly, I thought one of the strengths or a couple of the strengths was their offense and the bullpen. And they ended up being detriments to them. They just did not, obviously, the bullpen did not perform very well at all, really struggled. And the guys just did not swing the bats at all. It was just not a great overall team effort as far as being able to have quality at bats, purposeful outs, purposeful at bats. It didn't happen. And when you get a streaky team like that where the streaks were going south pretty much across the board, other than maybe Castellanos and a little bit of Harper, it makes it very, very tough to have success.
Okay, so you said two of the strengths of the Phillies team, and we get this right, were bullpen and hitting and their lineup, and their starting pitching wasn't one of the strengths?
Well, no, it certainly was there's no doubt. I mean, and obviously in the first half of the season was the best starting staff in all of baseball. And obviously having, Wheeler, Sanchez, and Nola as their three, and then, you just didn't know what you were going to get out of Ranger Suarez, who ended up doing a pretty good high wire act yesterday to try to keep the Phillies into that game. I mean, that is a strength, obviously, for the club, and probably the biggest strength in the first part of the season. They had some issues with Ranger, having some struggles, but the starting pitching was always something that was pretty steady for them. And coming into the series, you thought that they would have the edge in a couple different areas, but they didn't have the edge on the mojo because the Mets had the mojo working. They were committed to putting together quality at bats. They got the 2-out hits that are so huge in the postseason. You look at all the really good postseason teams, you get the 2-out RBIs, the 2-out hits, the back-breaking RBIs. That's exactly what the Mets have been doing and have been doing it for the last few weeks.
Well, the Phillies crowd is almost like a mojo in itself. Anytime you play in front of that crowd in the postseason, it looks like it's the craziest place to play. I'm going to have you put your GM cap back on because it looks like this team was assembled to make the run. Obviously, it fell short right now. The pieces are there. If you put the GM cap back on, where do you go from here? What would be your next move? How do you treat this offseason?
Yeah, as I said, I think there's so many streaky type hitters, Kip, that to me it's, you have Turner, who's a pretty streaky hitter. You have Castellanos, who's a streaky hitter, although he did sort of carry them for the second half of the year. Schwarber can be streaky. There's a lot of guys, and even Real Muto, who really struggled in the playoffs. I mean, you have some streaky hitters there. You don't have great, contact hitters, although Alec Bohm should have been one of those guys in the second half of the season after the All-Star game. He just really wasn't that guy, and he hurt his hand, and I think that probably affected him a little bit. So that gap-to-gap hitter, that guy that's going to put the ball in play, the guy that's not going to swing out of the strike zone, they need a couple of those guys to put the ball in play. I thought that they would have that in Marsh and Stott and those kind of guys. They didn't get it done. And I was just so surprised that they did not move forward. Some of those guys didn't move forward, Marsh and Stott in particular. I was a little surprised by the fact that a guy like Trey Turner, who's a tremendous offensive player and really accomplished. He's more of a hacker and a slasher. He doesn't walk very much. He's not a guy that's an on-base guy. And what you ended up seeing is a lot of guys, their swing decisions weren't very good. They need people in that lineup, particularly in the outfield, maybe left field and center field, where, and I think that's where you can probably make the most hay. As far as offense is concerned, they need some guys who can put together some quality at bats where they're grinding out the at bats and making contact and, making not just like that quality base hit or quality at bat, but the quality out too, right? That, situational hat. They could not string together enough base hits. It's a team that's sort of built on slug. And if you're not slugging, then you're sort of dead in the water. And that's sort of what happened with the Phillies.
Is it possible that they trade from the quality? Not trade from, Philly fans are going to be somebody's going to call up radio WIP and be like, well, you know why we lost is because we got to trade Taijuan Walker. I've never liked Taijuan Walker. Like, is it possible that they trade from some of this, like a Nick Castellanos to bolster, a different spot? Because Nick's a big part. I disagree. I mean, I understand he chases and you see it every day. You can feel like it's streaky, but he did, like you said, he carried this team. Could they trade from that depth, or are they like, hey, we're running this back and we're just going to get luckier in the postseason?
They're not running us back, Kratzy. They're not going to do that. I know John Middleton and I know Dave Dombrowski, and they want that damn trophy back. And I will tell you that they will make some moves. Dave Dombrowski's not afraid to make some moves now, and he's a very smart baseball man. He's a future Hall of Famer. I think that they're they're gung ho on making sure that even though they still have the window open, I think that there's still going to be real productive years for a lot of the guys we talked about. But it's going to start to it's going to start to close a little bit. And so they're going to have to surround them with the right pieces. I think in the bullpen, it's sort of a crapshoot. What they're going to do back there, I think it'd be great for them to get a lockdown closer. I don't know if they can do that, but I would not be surprised. I wouldn't put anything past Dave Dombrowski if he has to trade Alec Boehm or Bryson Stott or somebody from even their big league team to gain an area somewhere else. Maybe a Castellanos. I don't know. But I know that he's going to be creative, and I know he's going to try to do whatever he needs to do to revamp this or retool it, not rebuild it, but retool this team to get it to the point where it's not just a great team for the season, but a great team for the playoffs and beyond.
All right. You lived it. I lived it. Game 5, 2011. Was this a tougher season?
Why are you reminding me?
Because it's the day afterwards, and I remember you coming into the locker room after we lost Game 5, 1-0 to Chris Carpenter, and Doc threw an unbelievable. It was an epic game. Howie's in the training room with his torn Achilles tendon. Like, is this losing this game? Is it tougher, or was there more expectations from that team who had 102 wins that year? And I think we lost like 8 in a row in September after we clinched.
Well, I mean, obviously I'm not in the same position broadcasting and I'm an analyst, so it's a little different. I mean, it really hurt me. I actually, believe it or not, and I didn't really, until a couple of days later, really felt the impact of that in 2011. I was really, at that time, honestly, I was really concerned about Ryan Howard. I was really concerned because I knew after having talked to our trainer, Scott Sheridan, at the time, I mean, it was going to be his Achilles, and that was a really, really big deal. And it impacted him the rest of his career because he never really became, the player that he was. So I was really concerned about him at that time. And then later on, I felt the impact. Yeah, it was hurtful. I thought the 2011 team was the best team that I remember, and I was fortunate to be a part of that and help assemble it. But it's hard to gauge. I mean, obviously the expectation, because they won the NL East for the first time in 11 or 12 years or 13 years, because they got to the point where they had the big boys, they had the Harpers and they had the Turners and they had the Schwarbers of the world, and Wheeler was best pitcher in baseball, and had a pretty darn good, bullpen going in. I mean, you had all the right quote unquote pieces to win, and the expectation was to win this year, and they were hell bent on doing that. But it's a crushing blow to the Philadelphia fan base and certainly to the Philadelphia fans. There's a similar feeling. I do believe that this group, I think that they're not as old as that old group. I think they're healthier than the group in 2011. Obviously, Doc Halladay struggled after that, health wise. Chase Utley struggled with his knees, and then you had Ryan Howard. You lose three very, very big pieces, and it ended up impacting 2012 Phillies and beyond. But I think this is a healthier team, and I think it's still poised. I think the window's open for them, and I think they have an ability to add to the pieces that they have and the core that they have. But they're going to have to be awfully smart about how to do it, and I think Dave Dombrowski is the right guy to do that. He knows how to get it done.
All right, so this is going to get talked about. I haven't heard a ton about this topic yet, but maybe you have locally. So the Phillies won the division, and they got the bye week. I'm not even talking about cold bats necessarily because they scored a bunch of runs in game 2. For me, it's more of a advantage versus neutrality, right? Do they have enough of an advantage for winning a division, going through that entire season, and then, of course, running into a hot team? That's part of it. But do you feel like the format is set up for those teams to succeed because they should be rewarded for that? And yes, Kratz is going to make the case, and I'm not going against this, that, hey, you don't want to play in a wild card round and, get knocked out for losing 2 games in a row. But Phillies go down. Cleveland's on a potential brink of elimination. The Dodgers could get eliminated. The Yankees are in good shape right now. But for example, if we have 3 out of those 4 teams that got the bye get bounced, I mean, fans are going to unload all offseason and say, you've got to switch this. What do you think?
I think it's different for every team, honestly, Scott. I think it's one of those things where I think for the Phillies, I think it impacted them in a way that for the relievers, because they had the types of relievers in Hoffman and Alvarado and Strom and Kerkering, those guys needed to be on the mound to keep their deliveries, to have the success that they had. I think they have a little bit complicated deliveries, and their stuff sort of lends itself to having to sort of play every day and pitch every day. And I think that's one of the reasons why they really struggled. And they had that delay, that 4 or 5 day delay. And I don't think that the fact that they didn't pitch during that time and they didn't pitch in competition during that time, I think that affected them. I don't think it affects them as much with the offense. It's an easy excuse. I think the format's okay. I mean, you have to. I didn't like the 1-game playoff. I think the 3-game playoff is much better. I think it's more fair, and the fact that they do it in the top seeds home place, I think that was a very good idea. I just didn't think it was fair for a team that makes it to the postseason to be one and done. I think other people probably think differently, but I like the format the way it is, and I think it's just a matter of more circumstance than anything else. And again, I think it affects different teams different ways. And in the Phillies case, I think it affected their bullpen more than anybody else. Were you at the games in Citi Field? I was not at the games in Citi Field. I was doing pre and post from the beautiful Wells Fargo Center. Could the Phillies fans have brought more at Citizens Bank Park? I know the game was. It was 1-0 up until they took Wheeler out, so they didn't have a ton to, quote, cheer about. But they were watching, to me, one of the most dominant pitching performances by a starting pitcher. He had 30 swings and misses in 108 or 111 pitches. That is elite, and everybody will forget about it. Could the Phillies fans have brought a little bit more at Citizens Bank? I think that they were pretty loud there, man. That's a tough place to play obviously the Mets didn't get affected by it, but listen, one of the things that the Phillies didn't do, and they did this really, really well in the beginning of the season, they scored early, and then they scored late. They continued to score, and with the Mets, the way they are right now, man, if you give them a chance, I said it in the game yesterday, if you leave this game 1-0, the Mets will win this game. And I actually told the guys in the studio, if it was after the 6th inning and it was still a 1-0 game, then the Mets would win. And sure enough, in the bottom of the 6th, home run, Lindor, after, Jeff Hoffman had his struggles and they had to bring Estevez in. I believe that the Philly fans were really aggressive. They were great. But, the Phillies have to sort of create the energy a little bit too. They, had the home run by Schwarber early in that first game. And, I mean, you're right. I mean, Wheeler is just a stud. He is the best and the one pitcher that I would want to pitch in a game to win a baseball game. And you're right. He had an historic game. They just needed to back him a little bit more. Just add on, figure out a way just to get one more run. And I think that would have put them away. And they just couldn't do it, and the Mets hung in there and beat them up. I think the fans were into it, but I think that also the Phillies, they sort of, I think they started to feel the weight of the expectation. They weren't playing free and easy like the Mets were. Mets were playing with house money, man. They were playing with freely and easy. You talked to Charlie Manuel about this. You can't play if you're tight. You got to play free and easy, and I don't think the Phillies played free and easy baseball.
It's a good way to put it. And if you want more on this therapy session and you're watching this right now, whether you're live or clipped afterward, there's a really good show that covers all of this and goes deep. So it's Ruben, it's Jim Salisbury, it's Todd Zalecki. Go tell him, Ruben, give me your 10 seconds on. And there's Charles Barkley, who's not on every show. He's just on one, but he'd be pretty pissed right now too. But the Philly show is going to have an off season, huh?
Yeah, we sure are. I mean, we're going to be on there, have some more guests like Charles and others. I think we're working on Jason Kelsey right now, who's pretty famous in these days in these parts. Yeah. But really enjoyed being with Jim Salisbury, a super accomplished writer for years and years. Todd Zalecki, who's an MLB.com writer. Guys who actually not only understand the game and know the game, but they love the game. They really love baseball, and it's fun to be with those guys and talk baseball with them with a very, very passionate Philly fan base. So we'll be going all off season, because there's a lot of stuff to talk about after the struggles they had here in the postseason.
Yeah, mailbag, Q&A, all of that. Whatever you want to know. They'll talk about off-season plans once we figure everything out after the World Series ends. So, Ruben, thank you very much. Appreciate the time, dude. We'll chat soon, okay?
Hey, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content. We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.